Welcome to the Actionable ESG Talk Series, brought to you by AKFI, the Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, the world's first nonprofit industry association committed to the bridging the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. I shall add AI, of course. Actionable ESG Talk Series bring together great minds to discuss the current state and future state of ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. And I'm delighted to have today Linda Dunn. Hello, Linda.
Hi,
Uh,
Manuel. How are you?
Good. I want to introduce you by your bio a little bit. You are the faculty director and the associate professors for the Masters in Supply Chain Management, or SCM. This is the program at Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies. You guided the curriculum, faculty, and course development for the SCM Master's program. Wow, that sounds like a heavy load. You are a passionate speaker. We share the same passion, author, advisor, and researcher on how SCM interacts with corporate social responsibility and emotional intelligence and the management of those programs. You appeared in Supply Chain Expert in Fox 5 in DC, Discovery Plus channel, and multiple webcasts, podcasts, and conferences. So again, welcome to our webcast.
Thank you for having me.
We usually start with a a big question about the global trends. Take as much time as you wish. What the trends that link sustainability and supply chain?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, there's so many trends that are linking them, right? You can't de-link supply chain and sustainability where we are today. But let me talk about maybe one or two. First, that comes to mind, I just was teaching a global supply chain course, so this is very much on my mind. Onshoring and nearshoring, right? So this isn't just now, I say it's still current, but the disruption that the supply chain has seen in the last 5 years has been so much that when you combine that with also geopolitical tensions, now the tariff situation, all of that is creating a pressure towards onshoring and nearshoring. The positive to that can be when you think of ESG, sustainability is less emissions from less distance of something traveling, right? But if you peel that back even further, it's not just the emissions from whether it's from ocean freight or from driving or wherever it's coming from. If you are putting really your supply closer to your manufacturing, hopefully closer to your customers too, what you see is the reduced lead times, right? So those reduced lead times mean I don't need as much inventory. Maybe I don't have as much obsolete inventory. So there's really a cascading effect from that that is very powerful in many ways. So again, there's efficiencies. We will always be global, but that trend towards bringing some of it and certain elements, whether it's bottleneck items or strategic items closer in, will have an impact on environment as well. So, and again, I think there's a multiplier effect there, and that will be very positive. Probably another trend, and we're going to talk about this more, but I can't not just talk about AI a little bit, right? I mean, that is
Absolutely.
proliferating supply chain in every business, and it seems like article. But when you think about it, yes, it's the efficiencies, and it's already used for everything. You can think of so many use cases in supply chain, but those efficiencies can again help with the environment. And we'll talk more about different types of things, but even materials you might use, discovery, things like that. But it's opening a whole world where supply chain functions can say, is there a better way? And that's where I think AI as a trend is just going to play a tremendous role in helping us reduce our footprint, really.
Well, you started with the complexity of the system. I think one element is I think we are lacking historical data. We built the supply chains over 30, 40 years. I'm sure that the problem is before we build the supply chains, the long supply chains, the efficient supply chains that are just in time, and so on. They are changing now. As you mentioned, they change because of tariffs. They change about geopolitics. They change about wars. So the supply chain, as you mentioned, requires and hopefully will leverage new technologies like AI. Um, as you know from the academia, AI it's top of mind of I'm sure of your students in pretty much every class. In my case, the students I work with um, got me to think that AI it's only as good as the data we have. And since we don't have historical data, since there are so many factors that create the change, I really like the fact that you brought forward models and positive models. But I want to hear how this will, what your crystal ball may say.
Yeah, well, I mean, linking it to, you're right, there's data is so important. However, and the data that the LLMs have sort of aggregated from today have been largely public data. But when you take that and latch it on to really domain expertise, company information, again, keeping it private. We know that that's always an issue, but let's assume, it's being built for particular organizations. And again, maybe certain domains of intelligence. It could be freight records, right? So there's a lot of information out there, and actually it is being used in some very positive ways. And there is data. It's again, you just have to understand the data you're using. It's something that's built over time, but there are organizations doing that right now in a very positive way. And an example could be even, finding through records and bill of materials and things like that, finding modern day slavery, right? So there are things that are being done today, and there is some data out there that's good. And then again, I think as companies start to tune into their records, what they have, when we're also be able to change some of the data, get better data lakes within certain areas and areas of expertise, it will be very powerful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's a lot of work in progress, as you said.
Yes,
Um, notwithstanding that some of this data it's in Excel spreadsheets, in maybe some
yes.
record, paper records even somewhere in an archive. So there is an effort there, and uh, but focusing on the supply chain and focusing on sustainability and the ESG. Uh, and sort of continuing with the trends, do you see a beginning of orchestration of the suppliers and their customers, understanding together how they can produce these amounts of data that they eventually can help each other to be more sustainable and as you said, directly more efficient, more
Mhm.
profitable?
Absolutely. So I see there's a lot of collaboration that's needed. I mean, we always say supply chain is a team sport, and it really is. It's an outward facing, and that's one of the things I love about it. You're always talking with vendors, with customers, with other groups, right? So it's a very outward role. And so when you look at it in the past, and let me just talk about maybe supply chain's role a little bit, historically it had been, okay, how do you save money? And then the next day, how do you save money for me, right? And yeah, that was it. And so a lot of lean principles, though, that are used in supply chain help the environment, can also help societies by being more efficient, right? So there's cost savings, there's profit. triple bottom line. When you look at that, though, our roles are changing. So we're going just from saying, how can I reduce waste, defects, all of that important, right? Optimize routes. But now I get to be in supply chain earlier in the process, in the design phase. And I think that's a key shift. So that may entail really working with your R&D, but also working with your customers, right? What do they
Absolutely.
need? What could they possibly use this, which is a better material than this, right? And maybe you can get one more easily, or your source is closer and it reduces emissions. All of these things are facets that supply chain needs to be upfront in the conversation, and we are now. And I think that's a big shift and a positive shift. And the other big changes, because, and I was talking about us being outward facing, we work with a lot of suppliers getting their ideas, their best practices. If they've implemented something, I want to know. Maybe I can do the same thing. So having those conversations and getting innovation, and that includes innovation in environmental and societal best practices. So that's a really important pipeline to have coming into your company, and supply chain can play that facilitation role.
Absolutely. I was trying to imagine, the supply chain, and I'll tell you where I stop. If you look at, sports, baseball, soccer, whatever, you have small teams, 10, 11 people, 15, whatever. But you you know, I think of an orchestra, and actually a large orchestra that has to get the same, as you said, collaborate to have the same music sheet first,
Yes.
and then decide decide. I think we are still at the phase where we still deciding what language or what symbols to use for the music sheet.
Yes,
If
that's a
you're
good
maybe I'm
analogy.
too pessimistic, but I think we are just setting the music sheets, and of course there are different ways to assign the sign. Do you see
Absolutely.
the same, or you see it still as a team play?
Well,
It is a team play. It is a team play, but it's a big team.
it's a big team. Absolutely. And it only sometimes takes one team member to cause a mess, right? So that's where the
Exactly.
orchestration part comes in. And it might be one that you didn't realize, oh, we need that person on this team, right? I didn't realize they played such a big role. And we're discovering that. But I do think that you can have that kind of orchestration. I think culture is a lot of it, how you
Absolutely.
interact both with your partners, your suppliers, your customers, and internally. So some organizations may struggle more than others with this.
No, absolutely. And I think we'll come back to culture, because the culture of sustainability, it's what we try to
Yes.
figure out, how can it be built and instilled into the long supply chain.
Yeah, I would agree.
And thank you. And thinking again about the culture, what we observe, we did some research in AKFI about suppliers and the relation with their customers. We look at we were fortunate to have um, very committed students and interns that helped us with the research. The conclusion of the research is there are two sets of gaps in communication. One is horizontal along the supply chain, and the
Mhm.
other is vertical. So we looked, for instance, at car and tires companies, and we found out that the car companies are asking the suppliers different things. The tire companies in this case. So we just stopped at level 2 suppliers. Of course, we can go to level N, and we figure out that that requires attention also, because it requires this coordination, this collaboration vertically inside the industries, and horizontally with the supplier. The supplier looks, we found out that a tire company, a major tire company, looks maybe at 10, 15 major customers, different car companies needing tire, different sizes, different places, different sustainability rules.
Yes. Yeah, understanding where your partners sit on sustainability is critical. So when you talk about collaborating, first, as you said, even horizontally within your own organization, right?
Yes,
And I bring this up because, if you look at it and you have different incentives within your own organization and they conflict, you're not going to land on agreement very easily on some of the initiatives, right? So it really
sure.
has to start at the top. Um, and when you collaborate with other organizations, you need to understand, well, what is their mission? What do they care about? What are their values, their goals, their plans, and look for those synergies. And when you partner, sometimes you have to be honest. Sometimes it's like a marriage. It's like, do you think this is the right marriage or not? And maybe you're not stuck. Supply chain is not quite the same, but you want a partner that you will have a relationship where the culture is positive, where you align on goals and you can believe them, integrity, things like that. So, based on that, you want to bring in more than just the supply chain people into these relationships. You want to bring other functional areas to create that collaboration. So maybe
Absolutely.
the sustainability people for both companies should come in, possibly IT,
Sure.
HR, right? All of these, when you take different
Let's not
functions.
forget legal or not mention legal before it's too late, because legal also have to sign and approve the contracts, and everything gets in legal terms in
Yes,
company
and
confidential.
what matters though is you have both organizations committed to spending time together, sharing, and then also providing resources from different functional areas so that they can have these conversations and ideas can really mix between the organizations.
And I think that, if I may connect the dots with nearshoring and reshoring and all these efforts, takes also a big change in culture, because our observation when we did the research was that from a contractual and information viewpoint, the supply agreements are mostly delivery agreements, right? So they mostly cost, quality, delivery time, is time and sort of material kind of agreement. Now that we introduce sustainability, as you said, as you very well said, we're building a large team of collaboration and orchestra, if you want. And this team, it's new. This mode of collaboration, it's as you mentioned also, is nearshoring and reshoring. It's also a new model of collaborating. Is a simple example. If my carbon footprint objective is net zero by 2030, let's say a car company, uh, 80%, 90% of carbon footprint comes from the supplier. If I
Yes.
don't tell them, just tell them, I want zero, it's like, okay, I have control over 20% maybe of this objective, this KPI. I need your support and your, uh, you know, chain support to realize that, because you started by saying it's in transportation, for instance, it's in the distance, it's in nearshoring, it's in the time, inventory also as
Hmm.
a carbon footprint and so on.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of education that's going on. If you think of the car companies are rather large, right? And lots of different suppliers. And if you went to different tiers, it gets maybe even harder sometimes. But if you think about it, how are they going to be able to do anything if there's not enough education on the goals? If you're going to say, I need you to do something that will be more expensive, but I'm not going to pay for it, or I'm not going to give you the time you need to actually do it, right? I mean, you have to look at it and say, what can be done and how do I become, I always tell my students this, I said, in our strategic sourcing and contracting, I said, you have to say, how can I be the best customer so that they want to do business with me?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
being that best customer means you are sharing, you're understanding, you're not unreasonable. It doesn't mean you don't need things and want to be competitive. But again, I think as you also segment your suppliers, um,
Absolutely.
you can look at some and say, these are really my strategic ones that I need to focus on we're going to share ideas and we're going to spend a lot of time, my commodity driven ones, I still need them to reduce their emissions, but they're going to get pressure from everyone and we will be moving more often. You still need to educate, but maybe you're spending less of the time together because you're spending it more with your bottlenecks and your other segments, strategic segments. But I think it's important, again, that people are sharing ideas. You get somewhere so much faster when someone else has already done it and either failed or succeeded. And so if you can just learn from your customers and your suppliers, you can go much faster.
Well, absolutely. I'm smiling for a reason. About a year and a half ago, when we conducted the study, we found out that the additions to the supply agreements related to sustainability or ESG or both, right? Give me your data, essentially. First thing, they were not in the original agreement. Second, it had the compliance, stick. If you don't do it, it's like going to choose other suppliers. Well, you mentioned large companies need tier one suppliers, need large tier one suppliers because of the size, for instance, right? It's sort of, same kind of, but they have very the relationship, at least from the public documents they use to disclose sustainability, sound more like stick, more stick than carrot. Actually, there was a little carrot, but if you comply, you can continue to be our supplier. If you don't, we'll look for others. And the reason I was smiling is this is not that easy. Even before all this change that you mentioned, nearshoring and so on, finding reliable, high volume suppliers. For instance, back to cars and tires, you need the tires to ship your car.
Yes. You bring up a really good point. And I think when you look at what can be done, yes, you have to have a stick to some extent because you're on
Sure.
the hook, right? Like
Yep.
you will be fined. Some of these large companies, multinational companies, and with all the new regulations, they need to get to certain reporting and things like that. But the carrot can be incentives of, I will pay you more if your quality is better, or if you can prove this, or I will pay for, the audits rather than putting all the costs on the suppliers. There's a lot of unintended second and third consequences when you just press a
Absolutely.
supplier with no idea of what they're going to do to get there, right?
Absolutely. The
So,
first reaction could be reducing quality,
yes.
uh, increasing penalties, for variations in the and so on and so on. I mean, we can have a whole session only about the penalties, but you're absolutely right. Actually, what we find with sustainability, there are two things. Most companies consider sustainability a cost. Mostly, they consider a reporting or compliance part. They do not actually want to understand that sustainability is another way of doing business. For instance, reducing electricity, reducing carbon footprint, reducing water, reducing minerals, reducing all these are helping the supply chain as much as they help the customer. So absolutely what you're saying and what you're telling your students is essential. Collaboration, that's the starting point.
Yeah.
Starting to put on the table the sustainability together with the supply chain changes.
Yeah, and the focus on the short-term costs, it is an issue because a lot of sustainability is saying those costs will rise, your water costs will rise, your ability to get certain resources, but they're in the
Absolutely.
longer term. So the question is, are you managing your company only for the short term or for the long term? And so you have to look at even incentive structures to look at things a little bit differently
Absolutely.
and look long term. But maybe just to share one best practice as an example, or one example of collaboration that was pretty powerful. So the company I was at previously, we're a large food service company, also did retail. But one of the things we did over a decade ago was decide to start donating our ready-to-eat food. It was still good, still the quality, no
Sure.
quality issues, but we're like, okay, we don't want it more than a day. We want to be able to make sure that it goes someplace. So we started donating to Food Donation Connection, and there's other organizations, but that's who we did it through. What happened, we had to get, because we had our own brands, but we all, restaurant brands, but we also had some that are large branded franchises. So we had to go to them and say, hey, the food that has your label on it, we're going to be donating it. It might go to, they would find the local places. So it might be going to a school, after school program for those in an area that need a meal. It could be going to a shelter, different places. They would work through that for us. But when we did that and we shared that with our branded partners, lo and behold, several of them began donating their food. And it doesn't just have to be ready to eat. You can use the right quality assurance processes and things like that. So, and we
Sure.
did that too. It wasn't just ready to eat, but they started to do it in its street side. And that's a great example of an economic benefit, triple bottom line, because you're reducing the need for food to be produced somewhere for these people who need the food, right? So you're using food that would have gone into the landfill and it's going to people instead. So there's a societal benefit, there's an
And
economic
cost more to dispose of, right? Because landfills are not free.
yeah.
Disposal is
Yes, and there's tax benefits to doing it too. So when you look at wins like that, you can get people on board pretty easily. It's the longer term things that can be harder, but we've got to give people the perspective. Let's do some scenario analysis. What if water goes to this price? What if we can't access sand? What if we can't get this product? Part of leadership is looking long term. And so that's the job as an ongoing concern. And even with shareholders, if unless you're a day trader, you hopefully hold for a while.
you are not a shareholder, you are a day trader.
I'm not a day trader,
No, no,
but
no, no. I'm saying if you trade by the minute or by the hour or by the day, you are not a shareholder in the
yeah,
classic definition because I bet 99% don't even know what the company, more than the three-letter acronym of the the ticker.
yes,
They don't know what it is, right? What
yes.
what it is, what they do is like, okay, is this ticker is going up?
Right, right. So that, yeah, I would agree with that. They're not really shareholders, but it's important because you are the steward, right, of the long-term value of that company, and that includes risks to the business, costs to the business, and not having damage to communities. And I use that in the terms of whether it's not fair wages or modern day slavery or whatever that might be, all of those angles.
Absolutely. Also, you mentioned triple bottom line. That brought me to the thought of double materiality, which is the linchpin of many of the disclosures. And those are to protect really the long-term
Yeah.
shareholders, the stakeholders and shareholders. So no, so first observation is in this big tent, in this big team, we need to involve also the finance people because they have to report. And if they are in the European Union, if they are in California and other states in the US, if they are in Singapore, not sure about China, how strict it is. They have to disclose as part, as you said, if we predict the cost of water or inputs will go up, then we have to disclose. It's not something we can, keep it to ourselves and hope for the best. For instance, technically, you may be in the position to hedge by the current price and hedge, as an
Yeah.
example. And
Yes.
those are the finance departments, which, by the way, have to sign to the financial disclosure and double materiality. So, not to add more to the team, but they are an essential part of the play.